My presentation is about exploring the legal code in ancient Babylon and Egypt. The Babylonian Empire. Hammurabi founded the Babylonian Empire in 1792, where he created Hammurabi's Code. This code was etched into a stele that had his name on it. The code was important to them because it gave the people standards for acceptable behavior. Right here is a picture of the stele. Laws from Hammurabi's Code. To this day, Hammurabi's Code is used in certain parts of the world. We also hear similar phrases that originate from the code. This is something I have actually heard many times: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That came from the law of retaliation. It also is referenced in the Bible. In this code, there were a list of offenses and their punishments. One thing that is noticeable in Hammurabi's law is that the punishments are often harsh, and many of the laws were biased against women. Men were given more rights and freedoms and less punishment than women. While here in America, our laws are much different now, it seems some laws are tied back to the times of the Babylonian Empire. How did Hammurabi's Code create an impact on modern-day law? This video shows the impact that Hammurabi's Code had on the justice system. While his empire may have eventually fallen apart, many other leaders in all parts of the world continued the idea of codified laws.
Imagine what it would be like if we didn't have any laws, if people did just as they pleased without any regard for others. Life would probably get pretty chaotic.
The defendant in this case has been indicted by the
Law is one of society's most basic institutions, and one of the most necessary. It establishes a person's rights and obligations. The law also sets penalties for those who violate these rules. Equal justice under law, reads this inscription on the Supreme Court of the United States. Although specific laws change over time, most people agree justice is one of law's guiding principles. One of the earliest known attempts to institutionalize law occurred in ancient Mesopotamia, a region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It's where Iraq is today. This ancient king, Hammurabi, ruled over Babylon from 1792 to 1750 BC. At the beginning of his reign, Mesopotamia was divided into many city-states, all with their own pattern of shifting rules. But Hammurabi eventually brought the entire region under his control. He collected laws from the various city-states and wrote down a set of codes that soon governed the entire area. Hammurabi's written code allowed law to be a matter of public knowledge, and so helped advance the rule of law in society. His code dealt with issues of taxes and trade, marriage and divorce, and theft and murder. He assigned specific punishments to fit specific crimes. The Old Testament reflects Hammurabi's approach: an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Hammurabi's empire eventually fell apart, but he's credited with establishing justice in the land. And the idea of codified law was just beginning. The codification movement reached its peak under the French ruler Napoleon Bonaparte. After he crowned himself emperor in 1804, Napoleon wanted to bring a new order to France. He restructured France's legal system into a new unified collection of laws known as the Napoleonic Code. A great military leader, Napoleon soon conquered most of Europe. Just as Hammurabi unified laws across Mesopotamia, Napoleon's ideas and reforms spread across Europe. He established new constitutions in the countries he conquered, and so the Napoleonic Code helped modernize an entire continent. And today, a small town in Texas attempts to bring justice to its community. They discovered here that the majority of crimes were committed by juveniles. So for first-time offenders of misdemeanors, a teen court was put into action. Here, teenagers are prosecuting, defending, and sitting on the jury. Punishment takes the form of community service. An important message is sent.
The first message is that laws are important and that they should be upheld, that young people have a role in both being law-abiding and seeing that the values of the community are enforced.
As civilization evolves, it leaves behind specific rules and laws established by past leaders and governments. What survives is the quest for law, order, and justice.
In this video, it shows how Hammurabi, his empire fell apart, but his idea of codified law lived on. The codification movement peaked with the French ruler Napoleon, and he turned the legal system into the Napoleonic Code. In today's time, rules have been established, and we call them our laws. These laws are in place to keep us safe and to hopefully hand out fair punishments, no matter the status of a person, such as their wealth. Laws are in place to keep things running smoothly. One thing we have today that they didn't have during those times are lawyers that can speak on our behalf. What are some of the laws from Hammurabi's Code? Some examples of Hammurabi's Code include number 6, if anyone steal the property of a temple or of the court, he shall be put to death, and also the one who receives the stolen thing from him shall be put to death. 110, if a sister of God open a tavern or enter a tavern to drink, then shall this woman be burned to death. 127, if anyone point the finger, such as slander, at a sister of God or the wife of anyone, and cannot prove it, this man shall be taken before the judges, and his brow shall be marked. This happened by cutting the skin or perhaps the hair. 129, if a man's wife be surprised with another man, both shall be tied and thrown into the water, but the husband may pardon his wife and the king his slaves. 196, if a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. This is an example of an eye for an eye. Ancient Egyptian law. When and how were laws invented in ancient Egyptian culture? In ancient Egyptian culture, basic laws and legal prescriptions were in place in the pre-dynastic period. The laws were based on the idea of harmony, known to them as Mat, I believe. It was their belief that to have harmony, they had to live a life of consideration and mindfulness. Obviously, this did not always happen, which is why laws were created to help guide the people. The laws in ancient Egypt came with a harsh set of punishments for the guilty. A common phrase we hear today that also applied in ancient Egypt is guilty until proven innocent. Similar to our justice system today, there were 3 different courts: the Saru, Kinbit, and the Dajjat. If the first court, the Saru, could not reach a verdict in a case in their community, it would move up to the Kinbet, and if they could not reach a verdict either, it would move up to the last court. However, usually they settled everything within the community, so usually things were settled in the Saru. Some of the laws from ancient Egypt: a husband whose wife had an affair could forgive her and let the matter go, or he could prosecute. If he chose to take his wife to court and she were found guilty, the punishment could be divorce, an amputation of her nose, or death by burning. However, a husband that has been unfaithful will not face the death penalty, and instead will receive 1,000 blows if prosecuted. It was the duty of the family to provide tomb offerings for their deceased loved ones, and if they did not have the time, they could hire someone else to do it. If the crime was ever serious, such as rape, murder, theft on a large scale, or tomb robbing, the penalty was death or disfiguration. If one were to steal something not on a large scale, they would likely suffer amputation of the nose, hands, or feet. Hammurabi's Code compared to ancient Egyptian law. Some similarities I found when reading about both of these are that both sets of laws come with very, very harsh punishments. Burning of the bodies, feeding their bodies to crocodiles, death by drowning. For every law broken comes the price of either a fine, death, or disfiguration. Many deaths were imposed in inhumane ways, such as in Hammurabi's Code, when a woman may be burned to death for entering a tavern, or in ancient Egyptian law, when children kill their parents, pieces of their flesh are cut out with reeds before they are placed on a bed of thorns and burned alive. Both sets of rules also have strict rules against thieves with laws 6 and 8 of Hammurabi's Code, and the punishments in ancient Egyptian law pretty much matching up with death or disfiguration and amputation if someone was caught stealing. There was also male dominance in both sets of laws, with punishments being more severe for women if they were caught being unfaithful. While men did not face the death penalty, women did. Some differences. In ancient Egypt, a false charge was very serious. A false witness, therefore, was dealt with harshly. Anyone who purposely and knowingly lied to the court about a crime could expect any kind of punishment, from amputation to death by drowning. Also in ancient Egypt, they went through really great lengths to prove someone that's guilty. They would beat them up because if they couldn't prove they were guilty, then they believed that, it was a threat against their laws because, the gods were wrong. However, in Hammurabi's Code, number 127, stated that if anyone pointed the finger, such as slander, at a sister of God or the wife of anyone, and cannot prove it, this man shall be taken before the judge, and his brow shall be marked. So the difference there is that, slander in Hammurabi's Code ended up being, something as simple as a marking on the brow, whereas in ancient Egypt, a false witness was put to death or faced amputation. Another difference is that it seems as if women had a few more rights under ancient Egyptian law compared to Hammurabi's Code. In ancient Egyptian law, women were able to sue for divorce as easily as men. It could also bring suits regarding land, sales, and business arrangements. Here are my sources that I used to make this presentation. And that's all.